Massive education cuts causing chaos across the country today after the department slashes nearly half its staff. The downsizing all part of the Trump administration's plan to dismantle the education department altogether, while also targeting schools and colleges with DEI policies. The endgame for parents and local governments to fully control education policy. NewsNation's Elina Shirazi joins us now from the Department of Education, where employees have been shut out.
The Department of Education, where I'm standing in front of, was closed today due to security reasons. Yesterday, employees were told to leave at 6 o'clock after work. Now, a lot of reaction across the country. Red states, they're backing President Trump in the move here from the Department of Education, but blue states, not so much. We have some reaction here. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican of Louisiana, and the chairman of the Senate Committee on Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions, writing on social media that he'd spoken with the Education Secretary and received assurance that cuts would not affect the department's ability to carry out its statutory obligations. When the Department of Education changes were announced, Florida Senator Rick Scott expressing his support for shuttering the agency, saying it should be disbanded. However, now the Democratic U.S. Senator Brian Schott saying in a statement, quote, "People voted for Donald Trump to lower costs and make life more affordable, not to crush their children's futures. Worse, the so-called savings from this absurd move will be shoveled straight in the pockets of billionaires." As for the unions, the president of the American Federation of Teachers saying, quote, "Trying to abolish it, which, by the way, only Congress can do, sends a message that the president doesn't care about opportunity for all kids. Maybe he cares about it for his own kids or his friends' kids or his donors' kids, but not all kids." And impacted staff will be placed on administrative leave next Friday. They are reportedly supposed to keep continuing getting their benefits and pay for 90 days. Judy?
NewsNation's Elina Shirazi, thank you. And with all the chaos of the department's job cuts, advocates are taking to the streets, airwaves, and social media to rally to save the Department of Education. Nonprofit EDTrust is working to dismantle racial and economic barriers in our education system. Their Director of Advocacy and Engagement, Mandla Deskins, joins us now to break down how these changes could impact the future of education in America. Mandla, thanks so much for joining us. States currently have to follow a number of federal education laws. If the Department of Education is abolished, what happens to those laws? Will states get to make up their own rules?
Well, thank you for having me today. These laws will continue to exist regardless of the efforts to dismantle the Department of Education. And the department is still responsible for enforcing the law and delivering the supports and resources to children. The effort to gut the department from within risks federal laws going unenforced and kids being harmed. And I mean, to put it plainly, underserved kids will suffer because of these actions, and they will suffer the most.
I hear you. The Department of Education plays a lot of roles when it comes to funding and aid programs, a major one being it disperses those Title I funds to K through 12 schools with sizable low-income student enrollments. What are the economic impacts of those cuts to K through 12 schools, and where could we see the most of those impacts?
You know, here at EDTrust, we've been monitoring the effects of the dismantling, but at this point, we are in uncharted waters. The administration has been opaque about the effects of this dismantling on the day-to-day functions, and the legality is still unclear. When you talk about the effects on the day-to-day lives of, students, low-income students in K-12 schools, well, we're still a bit unclear. I mean, what we do know is this action follows a steady flow of education-related executive orders coming out of the White House aimed at destroying public education as we know it and making an affirming, culturally competent learning experience that helps all kids, particularly underserved kids, reach their full potential much more difficult.
We want to turn to higher education and potential effects felt at colleges and universities. Education standards already are primarily a state function, but with DEI being dismantled, how could that impact college admissions?
The reality is the attack on diversity directly targets and threatens the quality of educational services for students, particularly students of color. As programs and supports are eliminated that serve these students and other underserved students' populations, inequities will worsen. These students could be harmed academically as well as mentally as well as socially, and this may result in fewer underserved students pursuing post-secondary pathways, really because they don't see a viable path for them, or because these paths need to be created and supported to ensure that their dreams will exist and they'll be able to see their full fulfillment of their lives. Furthermore, potential cuts to higher education loan programs and other supports risk making college less accessible and even less affordable. But again, I still say that we're a bit unclear of what the impact will be because the administration has been very opaque about what these cuts are and what services will be most affected.
Mandla Deskins, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Washington is one step closer to avoiding a government shutdown after Speaker Mike Johnson scored a major victory, securing the votes needed to pass the budget stopgap through the House.
Now that the government funding bill has been passed out of the House, we send it to the Senate, and it falls on the desk of Chuck Schumer. He is the leader of the Democrats on that side, and he must determine whether he wants to fund the government, do the responsible thing, or whether he wants to shut the government down.
Now, the upper chamber has until midnight Friday to pass the bill or lights out on Washington. Joining me now is the Hill's senior editor, Jesse Byrnes. Jesse, thanks so much for joining us. Now, the ball seems to be in the upper chamber's court, and it seems like it's a lose-lose situation for Democrats here. They can either side with the Republicans and vote for the bill or potentially shut down the government. Do you expect to see at least 8 Democrats siding with Republicans on this one?
Democrats are really in a difficult spot. They're between a rock and a hard place when it comes to this. Right now, they're agonizing over this decision because, as you mentioned, they really have no good option here. They don't want to go along with keeping the government open if it means cuts to different areas that they actually want to fund. At the same time, a shutdown is terrible politics for whichever party is responsible, and Democrats would be blamed likely in this situation. And at the same time, the political calculus is different for Democrats in the Senate versus the House. In the House, they don't have to vote for this because Republicans are in charge and they can pass it on their own. In the Senate, Democrats actually have to have a hand in this, and if they don't go along with this, they likely would face a lot of the blame.
Democrats didn't have a seat at the negotiating table for this legislation, but could we see some last-minute demands from them in terms of amendments to this bill?
There's certainly some Democrats who are on the fence who are trying to make that case, but they really don't have any cards to play at the moment. Republicans have tried to amp up the pressure on them. The House already left for the rest of this week to try to say this is really, the ball is in the Democrats' court to actually pass this or not. And for many of these Democrats, they really have no card to play when it comes to trying to force the Republicans' hand.
Yeah, as far as forcing the Democrats' hand, rather, could we see Republicans who have made it clear that they're not going to budge, forcing Democrats to eventually back down on this?
Yeah, and very likely, going back to the first Trump administration, which was the last shutdown we saw, it was 35 days. At the end of that, Trump was the one who actually had to step down, and he had to drop his demands for more border wall funding because he risked being blamed for a shutdown if Republicans held the line. The situation has changed now. Democrats are the ones who, if there's a shutdown in the Senate at least, they would be the ones who would be holding it up. And no Senate Democrat really wants to face that blame. But at the same time, going along with this is not, that doesn't help them at all either.
Sure. One of those Republicans, Senator Rand Paul, spoke with Rising's Robbie Suave this morning. Let's hear what he had to say about the budget resolution.
There's nothing conservative about these spending levels. No fiscal conservative should support this because it's going to borrow $2 trillion. That was the principle which once upon a time united all fiscal conservatives. So I will oppose it.
You saw what Senator Paul had to say there. Is there a chance we could see other senators join in with Senator Paul?
I think Paul is pretty much the outcast here when it comes to this, much like Massey in the House. Libertarian-leaning lawmakers who have long decried government overspending and the deficit. So I don't expect any other Republicans to. But right now, there are Democrats to watch to see if they actually support this. We see John Fetterman, who also already said he's going to support passing this. Others to watch: Tim Kaine from Virginia, Angus King from Maine, and also Mark Kelly from Arizona, top Democrats who might actually support this.
Democrats are meeting in Virginia today for their annual Issues Conference. Let's hear what House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries had to say from yesterday.
Donald Trump, his administration, and extreme MAGA Republicans in the House are undermining everything that matters to the American people, including trying to take a chainsaw to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and public education all across America.
Democrats appear to be honing in on potential cuts to entitlement programs. As we approach the midterms, do you think that their messaging is going to focus around entitlement programs going forward?
Yeah, I think this definitely has legs for Democrats. It's a message that resonates. A lot of Trump voters are coming from states that would face a huge blow if the government does cut off Medicaid funding. And so, Trump has repeatedly said that his administration is not going to go after Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, but what the House Republicans are advancing would very likely call for Medicaid cuts. And so that's something that Democrats think they can rally behind and something that could resonate not just among their base, but also among Trump voters in certain parts of the country.
Before I let you go, we had retirement news in the Senate today. New Hampshire Senator Jeanne Shaheen, a Democrat, announcing she will not be running for re-election. What do we know about that decision?
Well, it's a huge blow to Senate Democrats. They have already been facing a difficult map in 2026, and it makes it even more difficult. They were set to play defense in several places, including Georgia and Michigan, and now to have Shaheen, who is representing a very purple state. She's been in the Senate for 3 terms. She decided to forego a 4th term. It makes that a very competitive and another area that Democrats are going to have to truly defend going into 2026, where Republicans are already favored to keep control of the Senate.
Jesse Byrnes, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Judy.
And for more of Rand Paul's interview on Rising, go check it out on the Hill's YouTube page. Inflation has eased slightly during President Trump's first full month in office, that according to the latest figures released by the Labor Department. The Consumer Price Index, which measures the prices of retail goods and other items, is up 0.2% in February from January. The numbers are slightly down from experts' projections for it to rise 0.3% on the month. The figures come following 4 back-to-back months of rising annual inflation in the index. The new report also comes amid weeks of rising economic pressure with President Trump's tariffs on Canada, China, and Mexico. That's today's Daily Debrief. I'm Judy Kurtz. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe to the Hill's YouTube channel. And come back here soon for the intersection between politics and policy.